welcome to How to Be a Texan. How are you guys doing over there, Kevin? What's going on?
It's just me, but I'm doing great.
Oh, that's right. It's I'm thinking of the phantom of your eldest son, Andrew, and he should be here.
He should. It's not the same without him.
No, it's not.
Tied up, busy.
I hope he's not tied up physically, but regardless.
Not literally.
Shout out to you, Andrew. So hey, today, Kevin, I thought we would talk about a Texas legend. You okay with going on the legend journey with me?
I always love the Texas Legend episodes, so absolutely. Those are my favorite.
So anyway, Kevin, I wanted to talk about Lady Bird Johnson as a Texas legend. You okay with that?
I love Lady Bird Johnson. I mean, I don't know tons about her, but every single thing I've ever heard or, read about, she just seemed like just a phenomenal person.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
She was phenomenal. She was one of our first ladies, married to Lyndon B. Johnson, president, 36th president. So Lady Bird Johnson, and we'll talk about why. So let's kind of break this up into chunks. So let's talk about Lady Bird pre-LBJ, Lady Bird with LBJ. And, LBJ died very early in life. He was a relatively young man when he died. And then Lady Bird post-LBJ. Mm-hmm. So let's break it up into those three chunks. And so Lady Bird Johnson.
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So she was 94 years old. She lived to be 94. She was born December 22nd, 1912, died July 11th, 2007. And interesting early life for her, where she was born into a family that had wealth. And so her dad, Claude, no, that's not her dad. So her dad's name, I don't have her dad's name. That dad was a sharecropper's son, but he had already become a wealthy businessman. He owned over 15,000 acres, all cotton, so it was well producing as far as revenue. And then he had 2 general stores. So
her dad's name was Thomas Jefferson Taylor.
Oh, that's a nice. I didn't know that. That's a nice Thomas Jefferson. Nice. Okay.
Thomas Jefferson Taylor was her dad, and then her mom was Minnie Lee Patillo.
Yeah, because what happened was Mom died early. Mom died when Lady Bird was 5. Mom was apparently a very eccentric person, and so she loved opera. And so here they are living out in East Texas in Karnak, and I'll be honest with you, Kevin. I'm not sure exactly where Karnak was.
Yeah, I'm not either. I can look it up real quick.
Karnack, Texas. Karnak, Texas. It must be way deep northeast Texas out by Jefferson. But at the time,
it's close to Caddo Lake.
Oh, have you ever been to Caddo Lake?
No, I haven't. Yeah, it's right on the border of Louisiana, basically.
Yeah. So Amy and I, we've talked about this many times, where we early newlyweds, we went out to Jefferson, spent a long weekend, and went out to Caddo Lake, and it's got that Spanish moss all over the oaks out there. It gives a real creepy look, kind of swampy, creepy look to the lake, but it's so pretty.
Yep.
But anyway, so she was raised out, born in Karnak, Texas, and then her mom died.
Born into money, right? They lived in like a old plantation house, like type of thing, right? And they were like high society type of people, right?
Well, yes. And so the eccentricity of the mother was that she loved opera. So here's a opera-loving person in East Texas, rural East Texas, and the mother, Mimi, felt like she was out of place, and people really noted her as being of poor emotional and physical health. And so as a result, she unfortunately died in a miscarriage when Lady Bird was 5.
She fell down a flight of stairs, apparently.
Yeah.
She was pregnant. She fell down a flight of stairs, and then had the miscarriage because of that, and then
I see.
Complications of that, she died.
That makes a lot more sense than just a straight miscarriage. Okay.
Wow.
So then apparently her mom's sister, Effie Paltillo, came and I think stayed with the family, and she was really the person that raised Lady Bird. And then, interestingly enough, I thought this was unique in that during the week, once she got to high school age, that she had to basically go and live with a family in Jefferson, Texas, because Karnak didn't have a high school. And so she had to basically go in and live during the week in Jefferson. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is cool.
And then she must have not been a public speaker at the time.
Yeah, but listen to this. This is interesting, right? So she was the third of 3 children. She was the youngest of 3. She had 2 older brothers. Thomas Jefferson Jr. was the oldest, and then Antonio, who they called Tony. And then it was her. And the interesting thing about the school situation is, which, I guess kind of makes sense given the era that they lived in, but they would send her to Jefferson to go to high school. I guess public high school.
Yeah.
But the 2 boys they would send to New York to a boarding school.
Oh, wow.
So they were, investing in the boys' education, but I guess because she was female back then, in the early 1900s, they're like,
yeah, we're not doing it.
You're just going to Jefferson. Yeah.
Oh. Well, I thought that
was an interesting little tidbit.
Well, the other interesting just kind of characteristic of Lady Bird was that she let her grades. She saw that she was the smartest kid at the Jefferson High School, and so she purposely let her grades slip so she wouldn't have to give a speech to be the salutatorian or the valedictorian. She didn't want to give that speech. Isn't that weird?
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
But she was clearly the smartest person in the room, but she purposely let her grades slip. But let's go back. What I didn't explain was the history of her name. And, her name was Claudia Alta Taylor. That was her God-given name on her birth certificate. But everybody knew her as Lady Bird. And so just the history of that was that she had a nursemaid at birth named Alice Tittle, and who always said that she was pretty as a ladybird. And then some opinions have differed whether it was really about a ladybird or a bird that was the comparison, or the ladybird beetle, which is commonly known as the ladybug. I know a lot of us call our kids, "Oh, you're a cute little ladybug," or whatever, but I'm sure you called your daughters ladybugs.
Yeah.
So somehow that ladybird stuck, and her dad called her lady, and everybody else called her bird. And LBJ ended up calling her Bird all the time, but that name stuck. So you never saw her referred to as Claudia at all. It was always Lady Bird. So then moving on, once she graduated high school from Jefferson, then she went and tried the University of Alabama. She got homesick. That didn't work. She came back home, and she ended up going to St. Mary's, I believe in Dallas, which is where she converted to become Episcopal, which I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, that was a junior college route. So she did the junior college route and then went on to, UT after that?
Yeah. So I thought this was interesting too. They chartered a plane. I'm like, how do you charter a plane back in, 1930, May of 1930? But they did. They chartered a plane, and she flew into Austin for her first time, and she saw the bluebonnets. So this is May of 1930. She saw the bluebonnets in full bloom around Austin. She fell in love with Austin, and that was it for her. She was totally sunk on Austin is where I'm going to be around. And so, the LBJ Ranch is not too terribly far from Austin. And then, that's where she met LBJ, and then really their life began and really centered around the Austin area. So she ended up going to the University of Texas, and she graduated there. That's where she met LBJ, and so that was a friend of theirs in Austin introduced her to LBJ, who was a 26-year-old congressional aide and had political aspirations. And so, what the quote was is that Lady Bird said that they felt like they were like a moth drawn to a flame towards each other. They said on their first date at the Driscoll Hotel, Lyndon proposed to her, right? And so she didn't want to get in a rush.
And he was a nobody, right? He was
at the time, he was like a political aide. So
yeah, congressional aide, 26-year-old congressional aide. He had political aspirations, but he was probably not anywhere in the same realms of where Lady Bird would, the circles that she would be in. I guess.
Yeah, I would think so. So she came from wealth, and so a little silver spoonish, but and so he was aspiring. So he had come from a political family. And he had political aspirations and was going along that route. And so they met, fell in love, and got married very, very quick. I mean, he proposed to her on the first date. And LBJ was kind of if you recall him, he was a bull in a china shop. He was, very gruff, kind of got what he wanted, and was, maybe not a bully, but he just was very forward with his agenda and what he wanted, and he just didn't mince words, and that was LBJ.
So he proposed on their first date. She said, "I don't want to rush into this," and he just would not let go. He was like a bulldog, right? And so 10 weeks later, she accepted, and they got married. I don't know if it was at that time, but shortly thereafter, right?
Yeah. No, it was quick. Yeah. So anyway, so that's kind of Lady Bird up to LBJ, born and raised kind of out in East Texas, super, super smart, extremely charismatic, but interestingly enough about that valedictorian salutatorian, she didn't really like, speaking in public, which I thought was odd, because she was so incredibly charismatic. And so then she meets.
She had 2 degrees also, right? She had one in history and then one in journalism. So she got 2 degrees there.
Yeah. So very, very well educated.
Very well educated.
Crazy smart. And so then she meets and marries LBJ. They stay around the Austin area for a time. And then it was interesting because LBJ didn't have any riches or wealth. But somehow in the inheritance that she got, I thought this was fascinating. So you think of the LBJ family as they had a lot of money. Well, it was because of Lady Bird. So what happened was when her dad died, somehow she got a $41,000 inheritance. She parlayed that by buying 2 radio stations in the Austin area. And then she ended up getting a TV station right as all that was coming in. And she made all of her riches. She turned that $41,000 inheritance into $150 million wealth for the family, which I thought was amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so then they bought their LBJ ranch together, and that was, that was right around the birthplace for where LBJ was born, but she loved it. It was a very special home for her as well. So
a little fun fact about their kids. They had 2 kids, right?
Yep.
Linda Bird and Lucy Baines. And so they intentionally did that. So literally all 4 of them had the same initials, LBJ. Linda B. Johnson, Lady Bird Johnson, Linda Bird Johnson, and Lucy Baines Johnson.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
No, that's cool. That's cool. Either vain or cool. I'm not sure which one. I'm not sure exactly which one. But then, as LBJ rose in the political realm, and he was a career politician. So, she would go out and help him, lobby and go and, get elected. And she was just extremely charismatic at kind of winning people over when he was extremely gruff. And so, she was with him. He became vice president ultimately after having served for really decades as, I'm not sure all the offices. I need to research all the offices that LBJ held, but it was throughout, House and Senate that he rose and kind of came into his own in Washington. And so then he became the vice president under Kennedy. And so she was with him, obviously, in Dallas when Kennedy was assassinated. We went through that in November of 1963. He was, he took the oath of office there at Love Field on Air Force One by a local Dallas judge. And, of course, Lady Bird was with him. And then he served as president from November 1963 until the end of 68 when Nixon took over. LBJ, and so Lady Bird was with him the entire time. And again, it was one of these things where it was very clear on how you got things done around the Johnsons, that if LBJ would basically kind of tell you his rough agenda, and then Lady Bird would kind of come and kind of smooth everything out because she was so incredibly charismatic and diplomatic. So she had there's a real gift for that.
Great example of that. This was before he was vice president. I think he was still, Congress or something. But apparently he had a big clash with Dan Rather.
Oh.
And, Dan Rather was a reporter, down in Houston at that time. Apparently Lady Bird followed Dan Rather in her car after this incident. She stopped him. She invited him to return back and have some punch. And just, sit down and explain this just how Lyndon is sometimes, and just like smooth the whole thing over.
Yeah.
So that was kind of her role, to your point of, sorting out the stuff. And she was financing everything too. She basically started his political career. She took $10,000 of that inheritance, and she used that to fund his first, run for Congress ever.
Wow.
So she was instrumental in, financing the whole thing, and then just kind of cleaning up, smoothing everything over with the bull in the china closet as he rolled through everything.
Interestingly enough, that Clint Hill novel, or a book that I just read, where Clint Hill was a Secret Service agent that covered from Eisenhower through Ford. Clint Hill was on LBJ's lead Secret Service detail, and he even described that Dan Rather incident where it was a very, very rough exchange between LBJ and Dan Rather, and then Lady Bird, sure enough, went and got him and explained it. And I think they had a follow-up interview between Dan Rather and LBJ as a result of Lady Bird getting that all cleared up.
Yeah.
So, and she did that with a lot of different people.
Yep.
So she was an instrumental force with LBJ during the presidency. And you remember during LBJ's presidency, you had, obviously the aftermath of the Kennedy assassination. You also had Dr. Martin Luther King assassinated during LBJ's time in office. So then you had these terrible riots that occurred all over the country during that time, and there was just a huge amount of civil liberty unrest because that was one of his big pushes. But then you also had Vietnam going on during then too, which was a no-win situation. And so LBJ, it was interesting that he and Lady Bird spent, we talk about now as a result of the pandemic that a lot of us are more and more working from home. LBJ and Lady Bird really invented that, in my opinion, because they spent at least a fourth of their time in office back at the LBJ ranch. There were over, I think, 75 different trips during the presidency back to the LBJ ranch. And they just spent a tremendous amount of time there because they loved it.
Oh, wow.
And they loved being in Texas, which was really interesting. So then fast forward to the end of the presidency, LBJ decided he wasn't going to run again. And believe it or not, he had a study done by some basically mathematicians, and they sociologists, and they were...
Oh, yeah, an actuarial study, right?
Yeah, the actuarial study that said, well, you're not going to live long. Everybody in your family's died, at 72. And so he's like, well, I'm not going to run. And so he and Lady Bird resigned from public life, went back to the ranch. Sure enough, a few years later, LBJ died. And so that was their time together. Then when you look at Lady Bird's life post LBJ, it wasn't that she just shirked into the shadows. She remained a huge activist on a number of different fronts. And so when I looked at some of the things that she had done, she stayed involved with the environment. She stayed involved with the National Geographic Society. She was part of, obviously the LBJ Memorial Grove on the Potomac was one of hers. We mentioned she was also a Board of Regents for UT Austin. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So she just stayed active. It was kind of like, for those of you that have seen the Hamilton musical, where Hamilton's wife really told his story. Lady Bird did the same. She told her own story and that of LBJ, and was able to, really continue the legacy of civil rights and the environment and many of the things that as a couple they really believe fervently in. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, so then her health started kind of going downhill when it was around, 1986. This was 13 years after LBJ died. Her health began to fail, and then ultimately she passed on July 15th of 2007 as a 94-year-old. So she had a long, long life, all of it mostly in Texas.
Yeah, very cool. What a great story. What a great life and legacy.
Yeah,
right.
So that's Lady Bird. So when you hear of Lady Bird Johnson, she was a great Texan, and a huge contributor to some of the improvements that we've had over the course of America with the civil rights movement, a lot of the environmental things that we've done in our country, and so a lot of that goes back to her and her husband, which we're grateful for.
Medicare, Medicaid, the first, really program to provide health care.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure she was a huge proponent of that with LBJ when they were working that up. So
yeah.
So anyway, I just thought it was cool that we can talk about LBJ all day long, but why not spend some time on Lady Bird, who was a phenomenal Texas legend that we should really honor.
Yeah, no, this was awesome.
Yeah,
great idea.
Okay.
And it's really nice to honor her.
All right. Appreciate you guys listening. Hope you all have a great week.
Have a great week. Subscribe, like, find us. We're out there everywhere. Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, 5 or 6 others. So subscribe, tell your friends, family, give them a subscription as a birthday present this summer.
Oh, yeah. That's a great present.
Yeah, that'd be a great present here.
Yeah.
Get to listen to these guys a couple times a week.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, look us up. Leave us a review. Adios. Bye.
See you later.